Today we're going to talk about Kerberoasting. Kerberoasting is dealing with a lot of the service principal name attributes that you may see on some different attack paths. Kerberoasting was first discovered as a weakness in 2014 by the gentleman named Tim Medine. He's got this organization now, Red Siege. He does a lot of consulting. He is from Texas, which is where I've actually met him a couple of years ago. Under minor attack matrix, you'll see it's under credential access. And right here, steal or forge Kerberos tickets. This is a bit different than like a pass the hash type attack, which is NTLM, or pass the ticket, i.e. golden ticket, which is also using Kerberos. This is ability really to address part of the Kerberos double hop feature. What I mean by that, when you're trying to authenticate out to a service and it's got to do something in the context of your different account, you may have what's configured as a service principal name. Like ActiveRose is an example. It supports the ability to do single sign-on through Kerberos by adding in a service principal name. Group policy, GPO admin has that same capability. You can do things via proxy as a GPO account utilizing the Kerberos protocol, so it likely will have a service principal name on that different account. The real challenge with Kerberoasting is any user, when they're authenticating into the directory, can use it to see that it's published, and they do have the ability to extract a copy of part of that hash offline of said service. And given enough time with a password, you can start cracking that different hash and eventually come out with a shared secret of what that hash with the previous value really is. So this is really applicable to anything that's using RC4 encryption. So think about like our migration tools, how a lot of environments are disabling RC4. Part of that's really to kind of help mitigate some different Kerberoasting stuff that's out there. And you'll also see, you put a PAM solution in place. If that password is being rotated regularly for an account that has a service principal name, you're in theory not getting enough time where you can actually crack it in a feasible time period where it does you any good. If you have like an 8-character password on an account that has a service principal name, that's really bad because that can get cracked very quickly.
Yep.
So this is why you want to hopefully either put it in a PAM solution, or what I usually recommend, use a gMSA. Use the Microsoft technologies where it's just changing automatically. You'll look in here, there's been plenty of different attack groups that have been utilizing Kerberos in the last several years. So the fact that anybody can get these credentials, that's not the scariest thing. You have to be able to put different controls in place to ensure that it's not going to be able to be cracked offline. Matthew Vinton did a good blog about this last year in 2023. What is Kerberoasting? You'll see some different key things here. It's very useful as it's an offline attack. This is why we can't detect it. If you have that hash offline, give it enough time, you can crack it, unless that password's been changed. It can get a little bit confusing with trying to explain this because you have to talk about the ticket granting ticket and the ticket granting service that's out there. But as you see in Matthew's blog, it's all about this is how the service principal names actually work. So this is articulating it pretty well. Definitely worth a read. And the other key thing, once again, RC4. So keep in mind, change order in, I think it was October, November of 2022, we started having the ability to detect if RC4 is being used or not. So that option does exist as people are trying to get rid of RC4. So for everybody for the migration team that's listening to this, this is part of AES being enabled, RC4 being disabled, which is another reason why you can't migrate over your different passwords. So looking through any more to stop it, use gMSAs, put things in your PAM solution, and we can detect if there is a new service principal name, a reminder, so to speak, that it's actually happened. So let me go ahead and do a new service principal name. To create a service principal name, you need to have domain admin or equivalent rights. There's some native rights you can, in fact, delegate out to be able to do this. So I'm going to do set SPN, and I'll do LDAP service just as a test. Jason, do you have an account in Titan Corp?
Sure. It's Jay Moreno.
All right, I'm going to add this to your different account.
Why not?
So I'm a domain admin. I just added this into your different account. So while we will be able to detect this different event, the key thing I think a customer would need to recommend the ability to do is just an alert to know this is happening. Because now JSON, anybody can actually see this published service, and there are ways to extract it off where I can get your hash offline, and given enough time, I would be able to crack that. So to remediate, I can get rid of that service principal name. That way they can never get that hash offline to begin with. And or put your account under gMSA, because if it's a service principal name, it should be a service, right? It shouldn't be a user account.
Correct.
That's a big no-no. So if I had that control in place or put it in a PAM solution with that password changing all the time, nobody would ever have enough time to be able to crack that password hash to begin with. Thought I had an alert here. Let me look and see what's going on. Well, this is the one I did earlier, from not set to LDAP service. So looking under here under Jason Morano. Jason. So right now, what I just did is we added the service principal name right there. There we go.
There.
And that's what's making it via Kerberos where anybody can actually get this hash offline. So one thing we can do to mitigate this or just have the awareness that's happening, go off the change order, set an alert. Hey, did you know this account's now configured as SPN? And double check your work and maybe check to verify that it's under gMSA or your PAM tool. That's one thing you do from a human element.
Hey, Brian, if you go back to change auditor and look at the event, I just want to see the event name itself. When you set up an alert, what would be the event in change auditor to look for?
See this right here? Service principal name added to user object.
Yep.
So
This
basically create a search with this criteria and then alert on it.
Correct. And this was an attribute that we added by default in the last couple of years. I think it was like 7. Yeah, that sounds about right. It wasn't always in there before.
Right.
So prior to that, we would have had to manually add it as an attribute to be able to collect.
Yeah.
And you just think about this too. This is where you could even put a control in place with change order where to add a GP or a service principal name attribute, you could just protect that attribute on some of these different things. But then people have to go through a certain process to be able to do that, maybe from only a single machine or things of that nature, right? You can get a little bit more granular with the capabilities that exist here.
So how can other users out there look for these types of events? It's mostly going to be through Windows logs.
Looking here natively, see this, the 4769.
There it is, the 4769. And the problem is you have to do a lot of filtering because you're going to generate lots of 4769s during every user requesting access to services within Active Directory. So to find it, you have to filter it down by DC, and then you have to look for, I think it's 4770. It's basically that service ticket was renewed, and when that happens, you can start to figure out that it's there, but it takes SIM operators it's very hard to filter out the noise. They're going to get hit with a lot of
this is overwhelming.
Events. Yeah,
too many different requests coming in here. What's the value you're going to get? You're not going to find that needle in a haystack. Now,
Not
what
likely.
we can do, make sure they're configured. We'll look at that state data of anything that does have a service principal name, be alerted of any other account that is not vaulted or put under gMSA. And then the other key thing right here, audit what's using RC4. And that is nothing the change order has the ability to do. We added this a while back. And people should be looking at if RC4 is being used in their environment. If you ever see this one with RC4, that is an issue. You should start resolving that. If not, over the coming years, Microsoft may resolve it for you. CIS made it a standard, like a level 1 thing, where all organizations should be getting rid of RC4. And Microsoft even had an article going back to 2018 talking about deprecating RC4 as well. But RC4 is a symmetric encryption algorithm. AES is an asymmetric encryption algorithm. This is why you may have a problem dealing with a customer right now where they have not changed their KRBTG password hash. They have not disabled RC4. They're trying to address that different traffic now and see what downstream may be affected. People should not be using RC4 anymore.
Well, let's see how this ties into Security Guardian. I know there is an event, obviously, in on-demand audit, the AD user service principal name attribute change. So this event gets pushed to on-demand audit. But let's close the loop with Security Guardian.
So there's findings in here, and I think we had something in here around service principal name. So you see that word service principal name, that's related to the Kerberos stuff. And while it's not Kerberoasting or an event actually occurring, you don't know that, right? It's taken offline. We can see where people could, in fact, do Kerberoasting to begin with. And I'm looking for service principal name. See this one right here?
Yep.
Here's a non-privileged user account with service principal name. So Jason, yours won't show up with us because you're a privileged account.
Privileged.
Right?
Yep.
So this is non-privileged accounts that have a service principal name, which means anybody could get these different hashes offline and get enough time to be able to get these different hashes to begin with.
It's scary how easy you can fix it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we see this all the time, like SQL accounts. There's a big fear. Most environments, the SQL admins, they have their own SQL team. They configure it. You don't want to break it because it's a mission critical application. But often those accounts can be cracked offline very quickly. I saw one last year, early 2000s, from a SQL service account that had a service principal name. That's going to get cracked in Hashcat, very quickly. So people need to be able to do something around these different things.
How is the remediation different between non-privileged and privileged users?
It's the same thing. A lot of the non-privileged ones, the first question is, why is this a regular user account that has a service principal name? It stands for service principal name. It should only be services that have that, right?
Yeah.
And they should be managed like a service. They should be put under gMSA in today's day and age and have their password rotated frequently.
Well, this can happen from migrations.
Yeah, but to privilege versus non-privilege, that goes into our tier 0 categorization. So our tier 0 collector here, that's what would actually denote Jason's being privileged because Jason's a member of domain admins. Those were just noted as regular user accounts. They still have service principal names. So somebody couldn't necessarily use this and get to domain admin, but if the account in question is a SQL account, has a lot of permissions, they can still get to the different data and do exfiltration if they're able to crack this hash offline, if it was a non-privileged one. Jason, I just added your accounts. Let's see, privileged user accounts as first principal names. I only have one.
Yeah.
Next time we do this collection, you would show up in here.
Yeah, he's actually showing up in on-demand audit right now.
Correct.
In on-demand audit, just not as a finding yet, because this assessment hasn't run yet.
Right.
Yeah, our assessments will run on schedule and look for those events, comb those events out of on-demand audit to provide the results that we're looking for. So this is what Brian was talking about earlier, how the Kerberos process works, where they can go ahead and grab that hash. What they're trying to do once they know the SPN is grab the hash from that NTLM communication that it starts to talk to the domain controllers with, and then they just impersonate that account. So this at least was a visual back to when you were talking about the Kerberos process.
Yeah, and remember, Kerberoasting was really prevalent when it was RC4. If it's AES, it's a little bit different, a lot more challenging. It's another reason why people are trying to hurry up getting rid and deprecating RC4 in their environments.
Yep. So another good post, detecting Kerberoasting activity
And this is interesting because this example, I had a very large customer. See where it says Kerberos service account honeypot. I had a customer tech a couple years ago. They set up an old account as a honeypot, and they were able to use that to trigger off a machine that was doing malicious activities. So that was the customer's, their attacker's entry point was coming from there. Like, yeah, nobody should ever be requesting the service from this machine. And they're able to fine tune an alert based upon that criteria happening. So it may be a cool thing you get a honeypot like recommended here. I've seen customers do it.
Still, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of our customers don't have that time. That's why our solutions make better sense to run these types of assessments, figure out where the problems are, and help guide our customers away from the danger without having to set up complicated and have the knowledge to set up complicated honeypots. And having a honeypot, just as a side note, it leaves you in a weird position because you're putting yet another fake domain controller out there, and it's supposed to help assess and decide who's supposed to communicate with it, and that's how you start to rule out if you're having an attack. But it's complicated and it takes time, and it can have its own problems in trying to set one up successfully in your environment.
So if you want to go back to Security Guardian, and I'm looking at this from a critical activity standpoint, because that's where it's going to surface up, right? Click on View Critical Activity. Although the collection didn't hit yet, but this will take you to on-demand audit, and we'll see Jason Morano in there.
This will be for us.
So if I'm doing a demo and I don't want to wait for obviously the next collection, and I want to kind of follow through my example, here's how I follow through it.
Yeah, you can show exactly the other service principal name accounts.
Yeah.
Any other questions about Kerberoasting?
No.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, all.